Charlie Chaplin, From Poverty to Legend. Do you ever feel like your circumstances define your future? Like the place you were born, the family you came from, or the struggles you face will determine how far you can go? Let me tell you the story of a boy who had every reason to give up. A boy who was abandoned, who slept on the streets, who went days without food, and who watched his mother lose her mind. Yet this boy didn't just survive. He became one of the most beloved figures in human history. This boy is Charlie Chaplin, a name that represents more than comedy. It represents resilience, creativity, and the power of the human spirit to rise above impossible odds. His story is not just about making people laugh. It's about transforming pain into art, loneliness into connection, and poverty into purpose. Today, we will walk through his incredible journey. We'll talk about his childhood struggles, his rise to fame, the character that changed cinema forever, and the wisdom he left behind. By the time you finish this story, you'll not only know Charlie Chaplin's life, but also understand that no matter where you start, you have the power to rewrite your ending. And remember, as we go along, keep learning new words and phrases, just like Charlie believed in constantly improving his craft every single day. The beginning, a childhood of suffering. Charlie Chaplin was born on April 16, 1889, in London, England, into a world of poverty and chaos. His full name was Charles Spencer Chaplin, and from the moment he entered this world, life seemed determined to break him. His parents, Charles Chaplin Sr. and Hannah Chaplin, were both music hall performers. Music halls were popular entertainment venues where people sang, danced, and performed comedy acts. Charlie's father was a moderately successful singer, and his mother had a beautiful voice that captivated audiences. For a brief moment, it seemed like Charlie might grow up in a world of art and music. But that brief moment didn't last. When Charlie was just 1 year old, his parents separated. His father, Charles Chaplin Sr., was an alcoholic who became increasingly unreliable. He would disappear for days, spending money on drinks instead of supporting his family. His mother, Hannah, was left to raise Charlie and his older half-brother Sidney on her own. Hannah tried desperately to make ends meet. She continued performing in music halls, but her voice began to fail. One night while performing on stage, her voice cracked and she couldn't continue singing. The audience, instead of showing sympathy, began to boo and jeer at her. The theater manager, in a moment of desperation, lifted 5-year-old Charlie onto the stage and asked him to sing instead. Charlie, small and terrified, stood in front of hundreds of strangers. But instead of freezing, something magical happened. He began to sing in his mother's place. The audience, charmed by this tiny boy with a big voice, started throwing coins onto the stage. Charlie stopped singing, ran around picking up the coins, and the audience roared with laughter. This was Charlie Chaplin's first performance, and even though he was just 5 years old, he had discovered something powerful. He could make people feel something. He could turn their anger into joy, their frustration into laughter. But life had much harder lessons waiting for him. After Hannah lost her voice, she couldn't work anymore. The family fell into extreme poverty. They moved from one shabby room to another, sometimes unable to even afford a single meal. Charlie later recalled going to bed with an empty stomach more times than he could count. When Charlie was 7 years old, something devastating happened. His mother's mental health began to deteriorate. The stress, the poverty, and the loss of her career had broken something inside her. She started having delusions, talking to people who weren't there, and acting erratically. Eventually, Hannah was sent to a mental asylum. Charlie and Sidney were left alone. They were placed in a workhouse, a grim institution where poor children were sent to live. Life in the workhouse was brutal. The children were fed thin gruel, forced to work long hours, and beaten if they misbehaved. Charlie later described it as a forlorn existence. He said, "I was hardly aware of a crisis because we had been in so many of them." Can you imagine being a child and feeling like suffering is just normal? Like hardship is the only life you'll ever know? This is what Charlie faced. But even in that darkness, a spark inside him refused to die. Finding hope in performance. When Charlie was 9 years old, he and Sydney were briefly reunited with their mother, but her condition hadn't improved. She would have good days and bad days. On her good days, she would tell Charlie stories, act out scenes, and teach him about the power of expression and emotion. Once, Hannah told Charlie, "Life is beautiful if you know how to look at it. Even in sadness, there is something to learn." These words stayed with Charlie for the rest of his life. His mother, despite her struggles, taught him something crucial. Art comes from feeling. Real performance isn't about pretending, it's about truth. But the relief didn't last. Hannah was sent back to the asylum, and Charlie was once again on his own. This time, he made a decision. He wouldn't wait for life to get better. He would create his own opportunities. At the age of 10, Charlie joined a traveling theater group called the 8 Lancashire Lads. He performed as a clog dancer, a type of dance that involved wearing wooden-soled shoes and tapping rhythmically. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. For the first time in his life, Charlie felt like he belonged somewhere. He loved being on stage, hearing the applause, and seeing people smile. He realized that no matter how hard life was offstage, when he stepped into the spotlight, he could become someone else. He could be funny, charming, and free. His brother Sydney also found work as a performer, and together they began to support themselves. Sydney was protective of Charlie and often encouraged him to keep pursuing his passion. Sydney would say, "Charlie, you've got something special. Don't let this world take it away from you." By the time Charlie was a teenager, he had joined the Fred Karno Comedy Company, one of the most popular vaudeville troupes in England. Vaudeville was a type of entertainment that combined comedy, music, and physical performance. It was here that Charlie began to develop his unique style. Charlie wasn't just funny, he was different. While other comedians relied on jokes and dialogue, Charlie focused on physical comedy. He used his body to tell stories. A simple walk, a gesture, or a look could make audiences burst into laughter. He studied every detail, how people moved, how they reacted, how they expressed emotion without words. One day, the director of the company told Charlie, "You don't just perform, Charlie, you become the character. That's rare." Charlie's talent didn't go unnoticed. In 1910, the Fred Karno Company toured the United States, and Charlie performed in front of American audiences for the first time. The response was overwhelming. People loved him. But Charlie knew this was just the beginning. He wanted more. He wanted to create something that would last forever. The birth of the tramp. In 1913, Charlie Chaplin's life changed forever. He was offered a contract by Max Sennett's Keystone Studios, a film company in Hollywood that made short comedy films. At the time, movies were silent, and actors had to convey everything through their expressions and movements. Charlie was 24 years old when he arrived in Hollywood. He was nervous, but determined. The industry was still new, and no one knew what would work and what wouldn't. Charlie saw this as an opportunity to experiment. His first films were decent, but nothing extraordinary. Charlie felt restricted. The directors wanted him to follow a specific formula, but Charlie wanted to create his own style. He believed that comedy should come from character, not just slapstick chaos. Then, one day in 1914, everything clicked. Charlie was preparing for a film called Kid Auto Races at Venice. The director told him, "We need you to wear something funny. Create a character." Charlie walked into the costume room and began putting together an outfit. He picked up a pair of oversized trousers, a tight jacket, a small bowler hat, a bamboo cane, and a fake mustache. He looked in the mirror, and the tramp was born. But it wasn't just the costume that made the character iconic. It was the personality Charlie gave him. The tramp was a poor man, constantly struggling, but always hopeful. He was clumsy, but dignified. He was rejected by society, but he never lost his kindness. Charlie once said, "I wanted the character to be a gentleman, someone who has dignity despite his circumstances." The tramp became an instant sensation. Audiences around the world fell in love with him. He wasn't just a comedian, he was a symbol. He represented every person who had ever struggled, every person who had been knocked down but got back up. Within a year, Charlie Chaplin became one of the most famous people in the world. But he didn't let fame change him. Instead, he used his success to gain more creative control. In 1915, Charlie signed a deal with SNA Studios that gave him more freedom. Then, in 1916, he moved to Mutual Film Corporation, where he made some of his greatest short films, including The Rink, Easy Street, and The Immigrant. Each film was a masterpiece. Charlie wasn't just making people laugh, he was making them feel. His films showed the struggles of the poor, the loneliness of the forgotten, and the beauty of human kindness. By 1918, Charlie Chaplin was the highest-paid entertainer in the world. But he wanted something more. He wanted complete creative freedom. So, in 1919, he co-founded United Artists, a film studio that gave artists control over their own work. This was a revolutionary move. Most actors and directors were controlled by big studios. But Charlie believed that artists should own their creations. He once said, "All I need to make a comedy is a park, a policeman, and a pretty girl." The masterpieces, creating timeless art. With full creative control, Charlie Chaplin began making feature-length films that would define cinema history. These weren't just comedies, they were works of art that blended humor, emotion, and social commentary. In 1921, Charlie released The Kid, a film about the tramp who finds an abandoned baby and raises him as his own. The film was both heartbreaking and hilarious. It showed the tramp's struggle to care for a child while living in poverty, but it also showed the deep love between them. The film was a massive success, earning over $5 million, an enormous amount at the time. But more importantly, it showed the world that Charlie Chaplin wasn't just a comedian, he was a storyteller. Charlie later said, "I made The Kid because I wanted to show that even in the darkest circumstances, love and hope can survive." In 1925, he released The Gold Rush, one of his most iconic films. The story follows the tramp as a lonely prospector searching for gold in the freezing Yukon. One of the most famous scenes shows the tramp so hungry that he boils his shoe and eats it like a gourmet meal. The scene is both funny and tragic. It reflects Charlie's own childhood experiences of hunger and desperation. He once said, "Life is a tragedy when seen in close-up, but a comedy in long shot." The Gold Rush became one of the highest-grossing films of the silent era and is still considered one of the greatest films ever made. But Charlie didn't stop there. In 1931, he released City Lights, a film about the tramp who falls in love with a blind flower girl. The tramp works tirelessly to help her regain her sight, even sacrificing his own happiness. The final scene of City Lights is one of the most beautiful moments in cinema history. When the girl regains her sight and sees the tramp for the first time, she realizes that the man she thought was a wealthy gentleman is actually a poor, shabby vagabond. But instead of rejecting him, she sees him for who he truly is, a man with a kind heart. Charlie once said about that scene, "I wanted to show that true beauty is found in the soul, not in appearances." Fighting for his art, the sound era, and controversy. By the 1930s, the film industry was changing. Talkies, films with sound, had taken over Hollywood. Most silent film stars struggled to adapt, but Charlie Chaplin refused to abandon his style. He believed that silent comedy was a universal language. It didn't matter what language you spoke, everyone could understand the tramp's emotions and struggles. In 1936, Charlie released Modern Times, a film that criticized industrialization and the dehumanizing effects of factory work. The film showed the tramp struggling to survive in a world dominated by machines. It was a powerful social commentary wrapped in comedy. Although Modern Times had music and sound effects, the tramp remained silent. Charlie wanted to preserve the character's essence. But Charlie couldn't ignore the changing world forever. In 1940, he released The Great Dictator, his first true talking film. The movie was a bold satire of Adolf Hitler and fascism. Charlie played two roles, a Jewy barber and a dictator named Adenoid Hinkle, a clear parody of Hitler. The film ends with one of the most powerful speeches in cinema history. Charlie, speaking directly to the audience, says, "We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness." The film was a huge risk. At the time, the United States hadn't entered World War II, and many people didn't want to antagonize Nazi Germany. But Charlie didn't care. He used his platform to stand up for what was right. The Great Dictator became a massive success and earned 5 Academy Award nominations. But it also made Charlie enemies. Exile and resilience, standing strong. In the 1940s and 1950s, Charlie Chaplin faced intense scrutiny. During the Red Scare and McCarthyism era, many artists were accused of being communists or having anti-American views. Charlie, who often spoke about equality and criticized capitalism's injustices, became a target. The FBI investigated him, newspapers attacked him, politicians called him dangerous. In 1952, while traveling to London for the premiere of his film Limelight, Charlie received devastating news. The U.S. government had revoked his re-entry permit. He was essentially exiled from America. Charlie was heartbroken. He had lived in the United States for 40 years, but he refused to beg for forgiveness. Instead, he moved to Switzerland with his wife Una O'Neill and their children. He later said, "I have no further use for America. I wouldn't go back there if Jesus Christ was president." Despite the exile, Charlie continued creating. In 1957, he released A King in New York, a film that satirized American politics and McCarthyism. Once again, he used comedy to speak truth to power. Personal life, love, loss, and family. Charlie Chaplin's personal life was as dramatic as his films. He was married 4 times and had 11 children. His relationships were often turbulent, and he faced criticism for his romantic choices. His first 3 marriages ended in divorce, often amid scandal. But in 1943, at the age of 54, Charlie married Una O'Neill, the 18-year-old daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill. Despite the age difference, their marriage was deeply loving and lasted 37 years until Charlie's death. Una gave Charlie stability and happiness. Together, they raised 8 children and built a peaceful life in Switzerland. Charlie often said that Una was his greatest blessing and that she gave him the family he had always longed for. The return and final honors. In 1972, 20 years after his exile, Charlie Chaplin was invited back to the United States to receive an honorary Academy Award. He was 83 years old, frail, but still spirited. When he stepped onto the stage at the Oscars, the audience gave him a 12-minute standing ovation, the longest in Academy Awards history. People were crying, cheering, and celebrating the return of a legend. Charlie, overwhelmed with emotion, simply said, "Thank you. Thank you so much." In 1975, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, becoming Sir Charles Chaplin. The final act, leaving a legacy. On December 25, 1977, Charlie Chaplin passed away peacefully in his sleep at his home in Switzerland. He was 88 years old. The world mourned the loss of one of its greatest artists. But Charlie's legacy didn't die with him. His films continue to inspire millions. The Tramp remains one of the most recognizable characters in history. And his message, that kindness, humor, and humanity can triumph over hardship, lives on. Charlie once said, "Life is a beautiful, magnificent thing, even to a jellyfish." He also said, "A day without laughter is a day wasted." And perhaps most powerfully, you'll never find a rainbow if you're looking down. Lessons from the Little Tramp. Charlie Chaplin's life teaches us that our beginnings do not define our endings. He started with nothing, no money, no family support, no advantages. But he had something more valuable: determination, creativity, and an unbreakable spirit. Here are the lessons we can learn from his incredible journey. 1. Turn pain into purpose. Charlie didn't let his suffering destroy him. Instead, he transformed it into art that touched millions. 2. Stay true to yourself. Even when the world changed around him, Charlie never abandoned his vision or his values. 3. Use your voice. Whether through silent films or powerful speeches, Charlie never stayed quiet when he saw injustice. 4. Keep creating. Even in exile, even in old age, Charlie never stopped making art. 5. Find beauty in struggle. Charlie showed us that even the hardest moments can contain humor, grace, and meaning. Charlie Chaplin's story is not just history, it's a reminder that greatness can come from anywhere. It's a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of kindness, and the magic of making people feel something real. This is not the end of Charlie Chaplin's story. It's only the beginning of the legacy he left for all of us. A legacy that says, no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, you have the power to make the world a little brighter. So go out there and create. Make people laugh. Make people feel. And never, ever give up on your dreams.